Hi all, this is BRR. In this video session, we'll talk about what are all the representations we have to utilize model class in ASP.NET MVC. That means, like, what are all the possible ways we have in ASP.NET MVC to get the data or push the data into some, relevant source files or relevant database files using this model class, and what are all the techniques available in ASP.NET MVC. So as we discussed in the earlier sessions about model class, it's nothing but a normal class, and there is a difference between model class and a normal class. A model must be a class, but a class is not always a model. That we need to note it here, because this model is similarly looks like a normal class, but a model normally represents how data is uh, stored in a file or a database, and that at the same time it's also can be used as a class. So this model have some more extensions, that like how to store and how to get the data from the database activities and relational databases and flat files. But when it comes to a class, it only have a class, bunch of object methods and properties and members. But when it comes to model, it has other facilities like how to store the data in the file or database and how to get the data from the database. And also it can be used as a normal class. Normally a class and model must be instantiated. That is a common thing we have in a model and a class. They are used as part of a model. If you add any DB context or entity context part of a model, no need to add them into your model because they will not be used as part of your model. And that point, it is just classes. So this model class and normal class are both the same in context, but model has some more enhancements, as I told you, like it has some extensions to put on the database or the flat files or some more sources which are having to keep and transfer data between systems. So this way, this model is having provision to keep the data and get the data from the database. So if you look at these techniques we have in ASP.NET, to represent model in the MVC, we have three technologies we mainly using in MVC. And one thing is ADO.NET, and another thing is LinkQ, and third thing is Entity Framework. These are the three technologies we are going to use as part of ASP.NET MVC to represent a model, or utilize model class to perform CRUD operations on database using these areas, using these techniques. Okay. And we'll look at one by one later sessions, like what is this ADO.NET architecture, and what is the LinkQ, and what is this entity framework. But a short fall and minimal description, this minimal points we need to discuss. ADO.NET. ADO.NET is a set of software components that programmers can use to access data and data services from a database, and it is a part of the base class library that is included with the Microsoft.NET framework. So this ADO.NET come up with the Microsoft framework. It has some components and software programming components for the programmers, and they can use to access data from the database. If you look at the abbreviation of ADO, it stands for ActiveX Data Objects, and it is a database technology of .NET framework used for connecting application system and database service. Okay. And also it's a part of .NET framework, and it consists of set of classes used to handle the data accessing, flow and phenomena when you get the data from the databases. And coming to the LinkQ, it is language integrated query. It's abbreviated as LinkQ. It's uniform query syntax in C# and maybe .NET, and basically using to save and retrieve data from the different sources. This is also similar of the ADO.NET, like basing of getting of data and putting data into the relevant database and the source. But here we have certain syntax which everybody should follow, and based on the syntax and query selectors, it is going to fetch the data. So LinkQ is an acronym for language integrated query, which is a descriptive for where it is used and what it does. The language integrated part means the link queue is part of programming language. So the syntax is more differently. We have to use it in this link queue, and we'll discuss later sessions about link queue. And this is all about link queue. Purpose of link queue in model class. So similar of ADO.NET, but ADO.NET uses the built-in components to access data. When it comes to link queue, it has some certain syntax which we should follow to write descriptive syntax for getting the data. And coming to the entity framework, it can be called as EF. The entity framework is an open source, ORM framework. ORM is nothing but this object relational mapper. It's a ORM open source framework provided by the .NET to the .NET applications supported by Microsoft. It enables developers to work with data using objects of domain-specific classes. So here in this entity framework, we are going to create some classes specifically, which are relevant to your domain, like table object, table class, column class, and field class. That kind of specific domain-specific classes and objects we are going to create it, and those things we are using and accessing the data from the relevant database and source. That is what the entity framework. So without focusing on the underlying database tables and columns where this data is stored and fetching it and placed on location, we can get the data using domain-specific objects in the model class using entity framework. Entity framework is an open source framework which I told you. It's a type of tool actually. It simplifies mapping between objects in your software to the tables and columns of the relational database. So it will map the relations like foreign key property kind of thing between the columns between the tables, and it will fetch the data. How we are getting it from using joins in the select statement in the SQL Server Oracle databases. So that way you can put up this relation using this field object and columns object in the entity framework, and it will give you the data and it will save the data into a database. Okay, so these are the main technologies we are going to use that will represent a model more and utilizing model class in the ASP.NET for CRUD operations perspective, especially for the CRUD operations and create and delete and update and insert data into a database kind of thing. Okay, so there are two classes available in this model, and data entity class and data context class. So entity class, again, I'm going to tell you that this is the class where it has all the objects which are specific to your domain database, like table objects and class objects and a columns object with the relation between the columns and the relational database. And coming to the data context class, it is a class at the top level of entity framework object, the one that contains all your collections of entities that map to your tables in the database. So the controller needs to be able to access this so that it can perform CRUD operations. So this is the topmost class in the entity framework, and it has relations and the collections of your entities that map to the tables and the relational database objects. Okay, so hope you understand what are the technologies we are going to use as part of model utilization to CRUD operations, and this ADO.NET link queue and entity framework. So all these three have a variant, different flow and the syntax of linking the database and source files to get the data and performing CRUD operations. So hope you understand what are all the technologies we are going to use it for the model CRUD operations when you're doing an application UI, and we'll look at these things in the later sessions one by one. Thanks for listening to this, and please subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos on this MVC. Thank you.